The SEALs were trapped. Their only way out was a pilot they'd never met, flying into a valley so dangerous it was a ghost on the map. They asked for air support. They got a Phantom. The air on the forward strip was cold and thin, clinging to the tarmac under a bruised, pre-dawn sky. It was a colorless morning that held its breath. Far across the concrete, a few maintenance lights cast long, skeletal shadows, their glow too weak to fight the oppressive gray. Captain Maya Viper Rostova moved with a liquid grace between the hardened aircraft shelter and her jet, the F-35A they called the Phantom. Helmet tucked under one arm, her boots made no sound. There was no chatter, no ceremony, just the quiet hum of a predator waking. Her gloves went on first, the black leather stretching taut over her knuckles. She cinched each one at the wrist, a familiar, grounding ritual. Inside the cockpit, the world shrank to the dimensions of her mission. She settled into the ejection seat, a perfect fusion of woman and machine. The start-up sequence was a deliberate, silent ballet. One toggle switch, then another. Hydraulic system sighed to life, soft mechanical heartbeats pulsing through the airframe. The head-up display, HUD, flickered on, a waterfall of emerald green symbology painting itself across her visor. Elevation grids, threat boundaries, flight vectors, all placeholder data for now, but they would soon become the language of survival. Behind her, the second seat in the trainer version she sometimes flew was empty. Just one seat lit tonight. Just one person on this run. In her ear, the secure comms crackled with clipped, disembodied voices. Nomad is staged for approach. Awaiting corridor green. Maya didn't respond. She didn't have to. Her focus was absolute. She brought up the weapons console, her gloved finger tapping through the armament loadout. 2 GBU 53/B Stormbreaker glide bombs. A 25mm cannon, fully loaded. Jammer cold, stealth envelope pristine. It was a checklist with teeth. She confirmed each line item, her ice blue eyes scanning the display with an intensity that could cut glass. The intel flash from the night before had been brief, its urgency typed in bold font. 3 new anti-aircraft sites had materialized overnight along the southern rim of a valley codenamed the Serpent's Tooth. They were sophisticated, camouflaged, and radar-capable. They weren't just a hazard, they were a cage, sprung around Task Force Nomad's primary objective. Command's directive was simple: carve a safe corridor before first light. If the Apaches went in blind, they wouldn't all come back. Beneath her boots, she felt the quiet tremor of the ready engines. She'd done this kind of run before. Different terrain, same impossible stakes. She had flown support for a unit that didn't make it out, a memory that stayed close but wordless. It was why she never flinched, why her hands never shook. It wasn't about revenge. It was about a debt that could only be paid in precision. Her crew chief stood just outside the yellow safety line, arms folded, his face unreadable. She gave a single, sharp nod. He returned it. The canopy sealed with a pneumatic hiss, cocooning her in silence. The world grew smaller, tighter, more exact. "Viper rolling," she said, her voice a calm, steady instrument cutting through the static. The Phantom moved with a silent, predatory intent, slipping free from its concrete lair. The sky ahead was a blank canvas, but she knew what was waiting beyond the ridge. Not a person, but a problem. A valley drawn in threat rings that she was about to erase. Maya kept the Phantom low, a ghost skimming the jagged contours of the earth. Below her, razor-sharp ridges and dry, skeletal riverbeds scarred the landscape. Her altimeter barely flickered, holding a nap of the Earth profile so tight that the jet felt like an extension of her own will. Stealth systems remained cold. No emissions, no targeting beams, no lights. Just a shadow moving at 500 knots. Her HUD layered the world in a language only she could read. Soft blue lines painted the terrain's contours, while infrared overlays tagged the occasional warm-blooded animal scurrying in the scrub below. She was reading the valley silently, line by line, searching for the serpent's fangs. Just south of the first ridge, a metallic cluster broke the natural monotony. The shapes were too clean, too geometric. Rectangular lines, upright silhouettes. She eased back on the throttle and magnified the thermal overlay. 3 distinct heat sources, standing figures. But at full zoom, they dissolved into high-fidelity, foam-bodied dummies. The heat emanated from a small, shielded generator and a propane heater. A trap. A clever one, complete with a microspeaker broadcasting the faint, looping sound of a truck engine. She felt no surprise, no frustration. Just a cold, analytical assessment. She tagged the site decoy and bypassed it, her mind already miles ahead. The terrain dropped into a narrow bowl, a natural depression that would be invisible to satellites. Maya rolled the Phantom into a gentle, sweeping turn, her wingtips seeming to brush the canyon wall. Her HUD pinged once. A faint, pulsing thermal return from beneath the lip of a dry ridge. It was masked by dirt and camouflage netting, a whisper of heat. She adjusted the contrast, peeling back the layers of deception. There it was. A radar-guided gun, partially buried, its dish rotating in a slow, patient sweep. Its signature was almost perfectly suppressed, but not quite. She tagged it. Primary threat confirmed. Further north, a thin trail of heat signatures followed the edge of a derelict orchard. It looked like discarded supply caches until she cross-referenced the terrain overlay and saw the trench line. Short-range launchers, likely shoulder-fired or automated flak cannons. Not a direct threat to her, but they could shred an Apache helicopter in mid-hover. That became her second priority. She plotted both targets on her console map. 2 confirmed threats. But the intel had predicted 3. The third was supposed to be along the eastern ridge, but the space was blank. No radar ping, no heat trail, no visual anomaly. Nothing. Maya expanded the passive sensor cone, pushing the Phantom systems to their limits. Still blank. A cold knot tightened in her gut. This wasn't an absence of a threat. This was a threat that was hiding perfectly. Ahead, barely visible through the morning haze, the Apache convoy began its ascent. Their rotor blades lit up as faint markers in her threat matrix. They were still miles out, but they were in motion. Task Force Nomad was on its way to a valley that wasn't safe. She keyed the radio, a short, encrypted burst. Strike window opening. 2 threats confirmed. Third is a ghost. Beginning run. No reply was needed. She closed the channel and dipped the Phantom's nose, feeding smooth power to maintain glide speed. The silence from the eastern ridge was deafening. It wasn't empty. It was waiting. The Stormbreaker dropped from the Phantom's belly hardpoint without a sound, a silent blade slicing through the pre-dawn air. It adjusted its course mid-flight, a flicker of movement against the dark terrain, and disappeared behind the dry ridge. On Maya's HUD, its icon tracked perfectly. 3 seconds later, Target 1 flared in a brilliant, silent bloom of white on the thermal display. A clean hit. The radar-guided launcher was vaporized, reduced to molten shrapnel before its operator even knew they were being hunted. Maya didn't linger. She was already banking left, trading altitude for a new attack vector. The Orchard Trench, her second target, had gone active. Her threat receiver chirped, a narrowband radar pulse, tight and sharp, reaching for her from below. A second later, a string of red tracer fire clawed at the sky, punching through the space where she had been moments before. Someone down there was awake, and they weren't firing blind. She rolled and dropped hard, the G-force pressing her into her seat. The flak rounds were erratic but well-timed. As she came around, the Orchard Trench filled her sights. Her approach was low, fast, and brutally exposed. This wouldn't be a standoff strike. This would be a knife fight. Her cannon was already hot. She squeezed the trigger. A single, controlled burst of 25mm rounds tore down in 3 tight arcs, chewing through tree trunks and the collapsed stone wall. The trench line erupted in return flashes, followed by a secondary pop, a cook-off. They'd stored their ammo too close to the launcher. A fatal mistake. She pulled away clean, the jet responding instantly. No warning alarms trailed her. Until they did. Her entire cockpit screamed. A full, hard radar lock shrieked in her ears, the tone piercing and insistent. This wasn't the flak cannon. This was new, powerful, and mobile. It had her painted. Maya reacted on pure instinct. She yanked the stick right, dumped altitude, and kicked out a cloud of chaff. The world outside became a blur of rock and shadow. No missile trail yet, but the radar lock was like a physical weight, clinging to her aircraft. It was coming from the east, from the exact patch of empty terrain that had bothered her. Her voice cut into the channel, flat and devoid of emotion. Viper is engaged. Corridor is not secure. Nomad, hold position. I repeat, hold position. On her sensor overlay, she saw the Apache silhouettes freeze, hovering just short of the valley's mouth. Their flight path icons blinked an urgent yellow. One of the pilots keyed a reply, his voice tight with tension. Holding. Lancer team is standing by. She went back to her scan. The third launcher hadn't been on any satellite pass. It had been moved in cold, under the cover of darkness, a ghost in the machine. And now, it was hunting her. The radar signature was unmistakable. A Panzer S-1, a mobile, brutally efficient hunter-killer system. It was the apex predator of this valley, and it had her dead in its sights. Maya climbed into a slow, deliberate arc, baiting it, trying to force its hand. The radar pulsed, tracking her every move. Then she saw it. A flicker of movement. A camouflaged tarp, half draped over a truck chassis, had been thrown back by the wind. The radar dish atop the vehicle was spinning, locking her position with chilling precision. She tagged it manually, her fingers flying across the console. No time for a guided strike. This would be a gun run. A duel. She came in fast and low, tearing a line across the basin. Her vision narrowed to the target. The truck was dark tan, coated in dust. She saw the missile tubes elevate. She was out of time. She fired. A burst of cannon fire hammered the launcher's base, shrapnel kicking up in a glittering spray. But it wasn't enough. Her threat receiver shrieked again. Missile lock confirmed. Missile launch detected. Maya rolled and broke hard, dumping chaff and flares in a desperate, glittering cascade. The G-force was a physical blow, trying to crush her. Her vision tunneled, the edges turning gray. In her rearcam feed, she saw a sharp streak of white smoke cut through the air, a fiery needle aimed at her heart. The missile followed the chaff, detonating early, but not cleanly. The blast wave hit the Phantom like a giant's fist. Her left wing dipped violently, and the entire airframe groaned in protest, a scream of stressed metal. She fought the controls, wrestling the jet back to level flight. Her warning panel lit up like a Christmas tree, a cacophony of alarms. Port wing temperature spike. Hydraulic pressure fluctuating. She ignored them. The launcher was still alive. The missile had been real. She had to go back. She gained altitude in a wide, painful spiral, rechecking her feed. The truck had repositioned, its crew disciplined and efficient. The radar mast was damaged, dangling by a thread, but it could still fire manually. If it got lucky, it didn't need a lock. Her hands were steady, her breathing even. This was the moment her entire life had trained her for. She came back in, steeper this time, more direct. No chatter, no updates, just her and the crippled beast below. She waited until the silhouette resolved fully in her sights, until she could see the heat from its engine. The crew wasn't visible. It didn't matter. She fired. The cannon rounds walked directly into the center of the vehicle. One struck the fuel cell. The entire rear of the truck erupted, not in a fireball, but in a heavy, concussive pulse that lifted the chassis off the ground and twisted it into a pretzel of burning metal. The radar signal vanished. The threat was gone. She pulled up slowly, her jet rattling. The warning panel flickered again. The outer skin of her port wing had spiderweb cracks radiating from the root. It was holding, but barely. She had won the duel, but not without a cost. Maya's voice remained impossibly flat as she opened the comms channel, the sound of her own steady breathing the only background noise in the cockpit. Corridor clear. You're green. The response from the lead Apache pilot was immediate, a mix of relief and awe. Copy, Viper. Moving now. Lancer is cleared hot. She watched from above as the two helicopters broke their hover, banking forward with controlled aggression. Their rotor wash kicked up wide plumes of dust that spiraled across the valley floor. Their formation tightened as they descended into the corridor she had carved for them. Between them, inside the main cabin, SEAL Team Nomad readied for insertion. Maya climbed slightly, establishing a wide, protective orbit, a guardian angel with a wounded wing. Her HUD remained clean. The valley below was finally, truly still. The Apaches flared out over the target compound, a gutted schoolhouse that had become a makeshift fortress. Ropes unfurled from their side doors. Through her thermal feed, she tracked 8 figures descending with practiced speed. They fanned out, moving toward the walls like wraiths. The first gunfire came 10 seconds later, tight, contained bursts. A voice filtered through the secondary channel, calm and professional. Building secure. 2 detained. Package confirmed. Maya replied evenly, copy. Holding overwatch. She watched as the SEALs began their exfiltration, their movements a masterclass in economy and purpose. 2 detainees, their hands bound, were escorted by 4 operators. The other 4 covered their retreat. They passed beneath the hovering Apache, and one by one, were lifted into the sky. As the last man ascended, the audio in her cockpit crackled once more. It was the Nomad team leader. His voice, once tight with suspicion, was now thick with a respect that transcended radio waves. Viper. Lancer is loaded. Package secure. Returning on cleared route. We owe you one. Maya's finger hovered over the transmit switch. She let the message sit there, unreturned. The sentiment was a heavy, warm thing in the cold cockpit, but it was unnecessary. Her job wasn't about acknowledgement. From her altitude, the Apaches looked like slow-moving insects, cutting clean lines back toward the horizon. They followed the exact path she had opened. No deviation, no enemy fire, just clear air. Below her, the old compound was already settling back into silence. She circled once more, the faint reflection of her own face in the dark screen the only company she had. Then, she keyed her return waypoint and turned for home. The Phantom's wheels met the concrete with a muted screech, a sound of arrival that was both steady and clean. Despite the damage, Maya's landing was flawless. She let the jet's weight settle, her hands still on the controls, guiding the wounded bird toward its shelter. Her crew chief was waiting, his face a mask of professionalism that couldn't quite hide the concern in his eyes. As she parked and the engine spooled down, he and a small team of techs approached. They didn't speak. They just looked at the port wing, at the scorched metal and the spiderweb of cracks near the root. Their silence was more potent than any question. When the canopy finally lifted, the dry desert air met her face. She sat for a moment longer, then removed her gloves, one finger at a time. She stepped out of the cockpit with practiced ease, her boots hitting the ladder without a sound. That close, huh? The chief murmured, his voice low. Maya just nodded once, her ice-blue eyes meeting his for a fraction of a second. That was all the confirmation he needed. She moved past him toward the cool shade of the hangar, her flight suit streaked with dust and sweat. Inside, she stripped off her harness and clipped her gloves to her belt. She walked to her locker and keyed in the combination. Taped to the inside of the door was a faded photograph. It showed a younger Maya, smiling, her arm around another pilot in a matching flight suit. His name was Ben. Her first partner. Lost on a mission over a different valley, years ago, when the call for air cover had arrived 30 seconds too late. She traced the edge of the photo with her fingertip. This was her why. The silent promise she renewed every time she took to the sky. In the silence of the sky, some heroes don't need a monument. Their legacy is the lives they save. What defines a true hero to you? Share your thoughts below, and always comment respect for those who serve in the shadows. For more stories of quiet courage, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.